But within the class, as we're now for maybe like the 5th time doing this one more time, we're up to chapter 16. Obviously, the goal today is not going to be to finish the chapter, but to at least extend somewhat into this new concept. So let me explain, let me overview the chapter, and then we will start learning. So the chapter, seemingly, we are by the way, very close to the end of the long approach of Tanya. To put that in perspective, when we say Tanya, we mean the first section. There are 5 sections of the book, of the entirety of the book. It's a compilation of 5 different writings of the Alter Rebbe, okay? But can't get sound on phone or connect to Zoom. Everyone hears me? Yes, I'm heard. Okay, so
yes, yes, we hear.
Wait, what should we say to, what should we tell Sarah? Can't get sound on phone or connect to Zoom on computer. Well, she must connect because I got a chat from her. We got a chat. Sound is off. Check the volume.
Do you have a phone option, or it's only the?
Not through this. She could call me on my phone, but my phone's nowhere near me. Maybe I should tell her to call someone else. I didn't even think you could call in, though it seems you can. You are connected because we got a chat. If your sound is off, check the volume on computer in general. And check the sound on the bottom of the Zoom screen. Specifically, does someone have their phone near them that Sarah could call them if all else fails? Rachel, you do? Just give me your phone number. If it doesn't work, call. What's your number? Okay, you're muted, so I can't hear you. I can lip read, so I saw 847.
847-293-0439.
Okay.
And what am I going to do?
Got it.
What do you do with my phone?
If Sarah, if nothing works, I'm telling her to call you. You could put your phone on speaker so she could hear through your Zoom.
Then I will plug my phone to be charging.
Okay, to make sure it doesn't die on her. All right. Fine. Hopefully she reads that message. I'm not near my phone, otherwise I would send it to her as a chat. I mean, I would text her, but okay. I hope you hear that, Sarah. Okay, great. So I hope Sarah is saved through any of the answers, any of the ideas, or Rachel's phone.
What should I do now? Anything?
Nothing. If she needs, I told her to call you, and then you can just answer the phone and put it on speaker, and then she'll hear your computer through your phone. Not the best, but it works. It works in the if all else fails situation. So let us overview a bit what we're doing here. We are, now let me just tell her if she can hear, I'd like to know. So we are toward the end of the long approach within the first of the 5 sections of this work that we call the entirety of it Tanya. Tanya is really comprised of 5 separate works, 5 separate books that are all within this one book that we're using this overarching name Tanya, but really refers to the first section. The section we've been learning for 30 years is the first section. As I said, we're about in round 5 of learning it. It's a total of 53 chapters, plus an introduction. We are now toward the end of the first section of those 53 chapters. The 53 chapters have a few subdivisions, and the first division is from chapter 1 through chapter 17. 1 through 17 we call the long road of Tanya. It is the approach of studying about God, contemplating what you study, to create a love and fear of God, through which, because you have such a love of him and a desire to connect, and such a fear of him and a fear of losing that connection, you will do everything in your mind and everything in your speech and everything in your actions to always be connected to his will, which means you will be a Benoni, someone who has complete control of their thought, speech, and action, and it's always for God. Now we're towards the end, so what we're actually doing here is transitioning into the next section. We're at the very end of the initial section, and as we will discuss today, we're definitely going to talk about studying and contemplating and creating, all thematic to the first section, but we're veering away and beginning, like introducing, transitioning to the next section, which will be chapters 18 to 25. We're up to the last two chapters of this approach, chapter 16, chapter 17. In chapter 16, we speak about an exception to the rule. We speak about someone who has a very difficult time feeling, a very, very non-emotional person. And we discuss, well, for us and Tanya, that's a big problem, because the whole foundation of this work, of this first section of these 53 chapters is, how does one easily and naturally and completely serve God? No problem. Love him and fear him. We spent 53 chapters discussing how to love him and how to fear him. But our answer is always the same. All roads lead to Rome. Everything in these 53 chapters gets back to the same point. If you love and fear God, everything else is automatic. You love him, you fear him, you will serve him completely. So we have a big problem here. Because if someone can't love and fear because it's really hard for them to have emotions in general, then how are they going to do it? That's the person we discuss in this chapter. And we give him a solution, as we will discuss in this chapter. The solution is called tivuna, which is something we'll discuss throughout this chapter. Next chapter, the last chapter of this long road of the first 17 chapters of Tanya, we actually say, by the way, tivuna is good for everyone. So we take this idea, which in this chapter, it's a new discovery for the exception to the rule, the person who has a hard time feeling. In chapter 17, we say, actually, tivuna is a great idea for everyone. And we discuss that throughout chapter 17. And with that, we conclude the long road and move to chapter 18, the short road of Tanya, because it doesn't talk there about creating a love and fear. It talks about uncovering the natural love and fear we all have, we all inherited within the powers of our soul. So this concept of tivuna is sort of like the bridge from the classical long road of create a love and fear to the short road of uncover your love and fear, because it's like not here and not there. It's not as difficult, and as you're not creating a love and fear. Remember, this person can't feel, that's his problem. So you're not creating a love and fear. But you are creating something. So you're creating something. So it's part of the long approach, but it's not a love and fear, and it's a lot easier than a love and fear. And therefore, it's sort of moving us to other actions with which we begin the short road of chapter 18. So that's a general introduction to understand where we are, where this chapter fits overarching in Tanya, in its position here as the end, really the final concept of the long road of chapters 1 through 17. Sarah, are you on now that you have 2 Zooms? Hope that means you can hear us now. Any questions on anything I said so far? Okay.
I got on. I had such a hard time.
You know what? Whenever it's really hard, it must be that it has tremendous value. So there must be something tonight that's worth listening to.
Yeah, I really wanted to. I was going to give up, and then I said, don't. Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem. At least for you,
Not
I'm
to
sure there'll be
change back
something
my name.
worthwhile.
I went under an alias, so.
Right, I see. So your Zoom said, she's back to Sharon. Okay, Sharon, we're not worried about. She could learn godliness. It was Sarah we were scared of.
Yeah.
All right,
Unmute.
so let's start inside chapter 16. And again, we know what's happening in this chapter. We're speaking about in this chapter, the exception to the rule, and next chapter is going to become the rule, a person that has a difficult time feeling. I'm going to explain why he has a difficult time feeling. And because he's in general very emotionally blocked, how can he create a love and fear? He's a hard time with emotions in general, but what's he supposed to do? He also has to serve God perfectly. Oh, we have a concept. We have something he can create, not love, not fear. It's called tivuna, which is going to be the subject of this chapter. So beginning inside, chapter 16. Looking inside, page 42. Now, this is a great principle in the serving of God of the Beinoni. The bottom line is what we care about here. The main point is to control, to rule, to control your nature, meaning the animal soul. That's what we're referring to as your nature here, the negative impulses on the left side, because in the left side of the heart is the residence of the animal soul. The right side is the godly soul. Through the light of God, shining through the godly soul in the brain. And through this to control the heart, from the mind to rule the heart. That's what we want you to do. When he contemplates with his mind, with his intellect, the infinity, the greatness of the infinity of God, to produce a spirit of understanding, of connection, of awe of God in his mind. The more you fear God, the more you do not mess up. So you're going to turn from anything wrong, biblically or rabbinically. I don't even mess up a slightest bit. And a love for God in your heart. And the right side, that's the godly soul side. With tremendous desire, to cling to God, and how do I cling to God? I'm human, he's God. How do we cling? Through the fulfillment of the mitzvahs. The rise of the Rabbanan, everything biblical, everything rabbinic, the Talmud Torah connected kulan. And primarily through the study of Torah, which is equivalent to all service. Okay, I read that rather quickly. What is the Rebbe saying there? What the Rebbe is saying is, the bottom line is to serve. What do you mean that the bottom line is to serve? What's he saying? What's the innovation in that? His point is, I've been educating you how to serve. We've been discussing creating love and creating fear. And we've discussed how to create the love and how to create the fear and contemplation and what to contemplate on. And the depth of contemplation. Because, but you know what, in the end of the day, that's just an option. In the end of the day, what's important is that you completely serve. Meaning, and this is, of course, opening up the idea of this chapter, I gave you the classical road. Think, contemplate, meditate, focus, create love, create fear. With the fear, with the awe of God, you will not mess up. You do not want to do anything against his will. Beautiful. That's 50% of your issue. And with your love of God, you want to cling to him. You want to be with him. How can a human be with God? By serving him. By serving him as he wants to be served. By serving him as he created the connections for us, called a mitzvah. A mitzvah means safsa, bond, a fusion point between me and God. So when I, because of my fear of God, refrain from anything he doesn't want, and because of my love for God, am motivated to everything he does want, that's it. I am perfectly serving God. I'm the Beinoni. But the Rebbe is saying, that's just one road. Maybe it's not your road. I sort of, for the past 15 chapters, have been producing this as the road. But now we're being, if you want to, open-minded and saying, there could be other ways. Bottom line, you got to serve completely. You got to completely keep away from everything wrong, completely do everything right. If this road doesn't work for you, well, let's figure out another road. The end of the day is you have to serve God completely. And even more, you need to know a great principle of the service of God, of the Beinoni, who is completely committed to serving, completely refrains from anything wrong, and completely committed to everything right. Shegam, that even maybe he can't do it. Maybe he doesn't have the ability. Maybe he doesn't have the intellectual capacity. Because to create a love, you have to think, you have to contemplate, you have to meditate, you have to understand godliness, ideas about God. Maybe he can't do it. So he can't create this love. He can't produce this fiery, flaming love, desiring only thing in it, this passion for God. He can't do it. He can only fetch out that natural love. Remember, we said this chapter and the next is segueing to the short approach of chapter 18 through 25. Chapter 18 through 25, we focus on the natural love that we're uncovering. Last chapter, for the first time, we mentioned this idea of the natural love. Remember, I highlighted it when we came across it last chapter, and we said, oh, this is the first time we're hearing about this idea. The first 14 chapters in Tanya didn't exist. We only speak about creating a love. Last chapter, we mentioned some people can serve God with their natural love. And now we're saying some people can only access their natural love. They don't have the tools. They don't have the intellectual capacity. They don't have the focusing ability. Emotions are hard for them. They can't do it. They can't create an emotional love. But even such people have the natural love because it's a gift from powers of your soul. So even that person can have this natural love, but he's not going to feel it so much because in general, he doesn't feel emotions. So where is it going to be for him? It's going to be in his mind and the recesses of his heart. We will use that phrase throughout this chapter. It's a love, but it's a love experienced primarily intellectually. It's a love he's cognitively conscious of in his mind and in the emotions that are submerged in his heart. Not the flaming, fiery, feeling ones, but latent in his heart. And this is that natural love. We know he can do it, but even he can't do that completely. Which, of course, starting chapter 18, we hope we can do it completely. Now, if you're looking inside, there's a little star after the word libo. And that directs us to the note on the side of the page. We're used to, well, actually nowadays, in most books, we don't have footnotes. We have endnotes. But we used to have a lot of footnotes. Some books still have footnotes. But we don't have side notes. But that's how the Alter Rebbe did it in Tanya. He didn't have endnotes. He didn't have footnotes. He had side notes. Generally, the side notes are more Kabbalistic, which is why they're a side note. They're on the body of the text because Tanya is not Kabbalah. Tanya is Hasidus. Often, the side notes are coming to resolve the questions a skeptic would have. Sometimes a skeptic with a little bit of knowledge of Kabbalah, and sometimes just a skeptic. But the issues a skeptic, someone who's looking to have problems, would have, so the Rebbe addresses them, but he's not addressing them in the body of the Tanya because it's just on the side to resolve a skeptic's skepticism. So it's in a side note. This one here is not that at all. This one here is not answering the question of a skeptic. It's rather filling in some information for us. It's a little bit Kabbalistic, but not really much. It's not heavy-duty Kabbalah at all, unlike some notes that are very, very Kabbalistic. But basically, we're asking here, or answering, the obvious question. Why not? What's his problem? Why can't this person feel? Now, obviously, we've all probably met people like this. We all probably know people that are not so emotional. They have a hard time feeling, they have a hard time expressing their feelings. You know, it's not the most common, and it's definitely not so rare. But why are some people like that? So the Rebbe now explains in a sort of Kabbalistic vein, why do some people have such a hard time with emotion? The reason for this, the reason why some people have a difficult time with emotion, because his intellect, and his base soul powers, they almost like we call ibor, a pregnant state and concealment within tevuna, within intellect, within understanding. They're they never like emerge. They were never given birth to. They're not in a revealed expression. That Rashi Tevos at the end is Liodei Chen, as is known to those that know Chen. Chen means grace, but Chen is also a Rashi Tevos, an acrostic for Chachmos Nistaros, the hidden wisdoms, which means esoteric wisdoms of Kabbalah. So there is what I'm mentioning. I'm not saying in such Kabbalistic lingo, but people that know Kabbalah know what I'm talking about. So for those of us that don't know so much Kabbalah, let me explain what the Rebbe is talking about. What the Rebbe is alluding to is as follows. Our soul, every soul of every Jew, starts off in the highest level of the highest world of the 4 spiritual worlds in our solar system. Right? The whole solar system we call Kabbalistically Seder Hishtalshalos, the order of progression of these 4 spiritual and then ultimately morphing into a physical world. It could also be called Olam Ois or Olam Hatikun, the worlds of rectification, to pick up the shards that shattered in the world of Tohu, the world of chaos, the reality that preceded our reality. So we have 4 spiritual worlds. Worlds here doesn't mean anything physical. 4 spiritual worlds. Tzilas, Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. And then we have the physical manifestation of Asiya, which is our whole Milky Way galaxy. Anything physical that exists is the physical manifestation of Asiya. Now, please feel free to ask questions. I'm going to explain this in a sense knowing for some of you, this is like, yeah, completely understood. And for some of you, this might be completely the first time ever hearing these concepts. You can question either by unmuting yourself or by writing a chat in general to everyone, as Sarah did, saying help. Or if you wish, you could scroll down to find my name and just send it to me. So I will see the question, I'll respond to it, but no one else will. You can do any of those 3 options, but let me explain. So we have 4 spiritual realities. We call each reality a world. A world meaning a world is a spatial concept. Now, obviously, there's nothing truly spatial here because nothing's physical, but a certain spiritual level. And as each level is distinct from each other, we identify it as a world. Now, world is a very broad term for actually myriads of levels, but they still all have a relationship, and that's why we call them a world. And the relationship is in terms of godliness, revelation of godliness. As the world progresses, the godliness gets more and more diminished. That's the point of all of these worlds, to eventually come to such a diminished godliness that we can create actually something called physicality. So over the course of the world, the godliness is more and more and more diminished until we come to such a point that we can't squeeze it anymore. Like, let's say you had a dish rag, and you're squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. There's no more to squeeze. Okay, at that point, we need a whole new world, a whole new reality, far lower than anything that came before it. And that's what led to, as we're saying, 4 worlds. Because between each world is such a jump, such a par, meaning the lowest level of the higher world is infinitely higher than the next level, which is the highest level of the lower world. Okay, each world is made up of approximately, and again, this is just approximately, really it's more, but as we're going to view it, 3,600 levels in each world. We have 10 basic ways God expresses himself, called the spheros. Each one of those 10 subdivides into 10. So 10 times 10 is 100, but then they subdivide further and further. So we get this number 3,600. Or actually, wait, I'm sorry. No, that was my mistake. Not 3,600, 900 levels. Over all 4 worlds, it becomes 3,600. I'm sorry, but I caught myself after I told you something wrong. In each world, it's about 900 levels, really more, but we'll say 900. And therefore, over the 4 worlds, you have 3,600 levels. Now, all of the souls start off, every single soul of every single Jew starts off on the highest broad category of the highest world. The highest world is the world of Atzilus. And the broad category, the first of the categories, is Chachma. Now remember, each world contains these 10 basic powers that subdivide into 10. So I'm going to give you, I mean, there's lots of different mashalim I've created to explain this. I don't know if any of them will work for you because I don't have a blackboard to express what I'm trying to say. With a blackboard, it's simpler. But let's think of a palace. We're going to discuss this much more when we get to chapter 18. But for now, you have a palace. The palace has 10 floors. The 10 floors are the 10 divine emanations, the 10 spheros, of which 3 are intellectual and 7 are emotional. So you have 3 intellectual floors. Those are the top 3 floors of this palace. And then you have 7 floors that are emotional. In each of the 3 floors, again, we're not going to figure out how we get to 900. You do, trust me. I'll explain to you 900 in chapter 18. For now, we're going to make it simple. We're going to say 100. On each floor, there are 10 rooms. 10 times 10 is 100. What are the 10 rooms? How each divine attribute expresses itself in all the 10. So a room and a floor. Remember, it's all the same. 3 intellectual and 7 emotional. So on each floor, we have how many intellectual rooms? This is to see if anyone's paying attention. How many intellectual rooms do we have? What did I tell you? You have to unmute yourself or show me with your fingers.
3.
3. Thank you. Great.
yeah.
So we have 3, right? The 3 intellectual ways God's attributes express themselves, because we have 3 intellectual and 7 emotional to create the 10. So on every floor, we have 3 intellectual rooms. But on all the floors of emotion, it's never pure intellect, because it's an intellectual aspect of an emotion. Like, let's say this is floor number 4, which is God's loving, beneficent kindness. So is there intellect in that? Yeah, there are 3 rooms of intellect. But all 3 rooms of intellect aren't pure intellect. They're the intellect of loving kindness. So we have God's wisdom of loving kindness, God's understanding of loving kindness, God's connectivity of loving kindness. Those are 3 intellectual powers, but they're not purely intellectual because they're of loving kindness. So therefore, there are only 3 floors that their intellectual rooms are pure intellect, right? Because there are 3 intellectual floors, and on each floor, there are 3 rooms of intellect. So out of the 100 rooms, 100 options on a world, how many are pure intellect? You want to unmute yourself, Rachel? Yay, Rachel. 9. Good work. 9, because we have 3 floors that are intellectual. So the base is intellect. And in those 3 floors, we have, like in every floor, 3 rooms that are intellectual. 3 times 3 is 9. So we have 3 rooms on the floor of Chachma, 3 rooms on the floor of Bina, and 3 rooms on the floor of Das. So out of 100 options, 9% are pure intellect. Everything else is a combination of intellect and emotion, or is purely emotional. There's a lot of pure emotion, and there's some, that's the best, the balance of intellect and emotion. But there are 9 rooms that are pure intellect out of every 100. 9% of each world is pure intellect. If you have any questions on that, ask me now. Okay, so it's not much. 91% is pure intellect, pure emotion, or a balance. But there's 9% pure intellect. Now let's go back to our soul. Our soul starts off on the top floor of the top palace, the highest world, highest level of the highest world. And every soul travels. Remember, we said there's about 900 levels on each world. Every soul travels to a very specific destination, to a very specific world, in a very specific world, to a very specific locale in that world. Who determines that? God. The height of the world, which place in the world, it's all determined by God. Most of the souls arrive at a purely intellectual place or a intellectual, emotional, or emotional intellectual place. But again, 9%, if this was evenly distributed, which I'm not saying it is, but 9% of the options, at least let's say it like that, 9% of the options are pure intellect. So not much, very little, but there, 9%. Any soul who arrived at one of those 9 spots per world, obviously there's more because each of those 9 subdivide, but it doesn't make a difference, it's the same mathematical percentage. So any soul that arrives at those 9% pure intellect, the floor is intellect and the room is intellect, it's intellect, any soul that arrives at that pure intellect and then comes to planet Earth is a highly intellectual soul. All emotions are very submerged. It doesn't mean it's impossible. It means it's hard. Now, if you will call it personality or powers of your soul, determines the personality of the person possessing that soul. So if someone's soul landed at kindness of kindness, love of love, whoa, imagine what type of person they would be. Pure kindness, pure love, pure giving. I know people like that. Very emotional, very loving, very giving, no limits, no boundaries, no self, just giving, 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 giving. That's what they're like. That's their natural personality, not their worked on to be a nice person personality. Their natural personality. That means that's where their soul landed. I can't tell you which world, but I can tell you which level in the world. And someone who's so coldly intellectual, not mean, not nice, just cold intellect, landed in one of those 9 possible rooms. And therefore, the Rebbe says, that's why some people have a problem feeling. We could say it's trauma from their youth, it's this, it's that. The Rebbe's saying, no, it's a spiritual bias. It's a spiritual bias of intellect, which could be a big advantage for many things. But because we know to really serve God, you have to love and fear, we got a problem. And therefore, the Rebbe is looking at it like, not that this person cannot feel. And later in Tanya, we're going to come back to him and we're going to demand from him to feel, because he can, but it's really difficult. And as such, what we want to do is find a way for a person who wants a relationship with God, wants to serve God completely, but the regular road is not going to work. And that's why the Rebbe introduced this chapter by saying, guess what? Until now, you thought the process was important. Let's be Western world Americans. We care about the product. We don't care about the process. We want you to completely serve God. We want you to be a Benoni. We want you to give God every action, every speech, and every thought. How you get there doesn't make a difference. Till now, I said create a love. You can't. No problem. I'm very flexible. Just get there. Get to my bottom line. Serve God completely. But how am I supposed to serve God? I thought serving God is with emotion and I don't feel. The Rebbe says, I'll give you a tool. And the tool is called tivuna, which is what we said this chapter is going to discuss, how to create tivuna. And we said next chapter, we're going to find out everyone needs to use tivuna. But in this chapter, it's for this exceptional 9% if evenly distributed person whose soul is rooted. In other words, we all start in the same place and then we all travel. Every soul travels. That final address that you arrive to, what God determined, which then you come into a body, that final address impacts the most tremendously the nature of your soul. And this person's final address was intellect of intellect. And that's why he has a really hard time feeling. It's possible, but it's very difficult. But don't worry, he's going to create tivuna. He will be a Benoni as well. Obviously, intellect has a lot of advantages, so he's going to try to harness them to compensate for the disadvantage. Any questions on any of this? Okay, remember, you can talk a question, you can chat a question, you can chat it privately, you can chat it publicly. So we are now going to discuss what should this person do. I told you he's got to create tivuna. Well, he doesn't know that. He never learned the chapter yet. What does it mean to create tivuna? So there is going to give him 5 steps of thought. Remember, he's intellectual. You don't have to be brilliant. He just uses his mind. That's his go-to. So you're going to think 5 thoughts. And the power, the force of those thoughts will drive you to be this Benoni. No emotion, don't worry. Your emotion's submerged, that's fine. Your mind is going to get you there. Dahainu, first thought. Shahalev mevin beruach chachma bina shebemocho gedulas ein sof baruch hu. The first thought you have to think and focus on and obsess on is understanding. It's a very interesting term the Rebbe used. Shahalev mevin. The heart understands. That's weird. We don't say a heart understands. We say a heart feels. Yeah, but his heart understands. He's using his heart. We said he's going to utilize his natural love that we all have. We're going to talk about in chapter 18. But he can't use his heart emotionally. He's intellectualizing his heart. So his heart's understanding with the spirit of wisdom in his mind intellectualizing his heart, the greatness of the infinity of God, that everything is like nothing to God. God is all. There is nothing but him. There's nothing more valuable than him. There's nothing of any value besides him. He is all. Asher al kain, that therefore, yes, hello. Yisparech, very interesting term the Rebbe is going to use now, unusual word. It is appropriate for him, for God, that the soul of all living should only want to cling to him, to be comprised in his life, to expire into his existence. So this is the first thought the Rebbe said. The Rebbe is giving him a step-by-step toolbook of how to be a Benoni even though you do not feel too much, too easily. The first thing you have to do is harness your powers of thought and really, really don't just say it. And of course you agree with it. I mean, we all agree with it, but think it and think it and think it and think it. Give the thought tremendous power. There is nothing besides God. There is nothing greater than God. There's nothing of any value. The only thing is God. And as such, what is better? What has any value besides being with God? That's the thought. Now, we all understood it. It wasn't like, I didn't say anything. I hope we all understood it. If someone has a question, let me know, and that's fine. But it's not an incredibly deep, incredibly difficult, incredibly Kabbalistic, incredibly intellectual thought. We're saying, bottom line, it's all God. There's nothing but God. So every single thing wants to have reality. Well, if the only thing real is God, then every single thing wants to be with God. Because through being with God, now you're real too. If he is the only thing of value and you want value, you want to have value, cling to him. He's the only value. You want life, he's the only thing that's alive. Cling to him, you have life. This is sort of the basic premise thought of that sort of foundational idea of being one with God. Why? Because he's it all and all that is. And therefore, what will be of any value besides being with God? So again, it's a simple thought, and a person can spend the rest of their life thinking that thought. And it's a highly inspirational thought. It's a highly motivating thought. It's a thought that's very practical. The Alter Rebbe didn't take something too deep and esoteric for us. He took something very practical and very real. And a lot of us think that. We might put it in different words, but every person who chose to be Orthodox, not raised that way, basically is thinking that same thing. Everything is meaningless. What's the point? I should pursue a career from it?
Sorry, that's what I was wondering. Because I feel like sometimes like people who are just so like, I guess, smart or wise or whatever, you're saying like they're more atheists. Like they're not like, you know what I mean? They're like
cold.
really.
Intellect is very cold. There's nothing colder than an intellect.
So it's like an atheist person. So like, why would they even care to?
No. Thank you for raising that question. This person, it's very interesting from a raise, and I'm gonna expand on it a little bit even beyond her question. The Alter Rebbe in Tanya is not addressing an atheist, a non-believer. It's not his frame of reference, if you want to use that term. The Alter Rebbe looks at every Jew as he truly is, which is one who naturally believes in God. We all naturally believe in God by virtue of our soul that is a piece of God. So the Alter Rebbe never looks at a Jew and sees an atheist. He could look at a Jew and see a confused person who's struggling with his animal, who's struggling with his evil inclination. He never sees an atheist. So he's not here in this chapter. You are right. People that are intellectual are cold. And Hasidus speaks a lot about the dangers of intellect and the coldness of intellect and the skepticism of intellect. You're right about all of that. But in this chapter, we're not worried that this person doesn't want God because he's too full of himself, because he's too smart, because he's too cold. That's not our issue. The premise of the Alter Rebbe is this person wants God, but he has a problem. He can't feel, so how's he supposed to get to God? Like I taught you for 15 chapters, think, to feel, to serve. But now that link got severed. You could think, but it's not going to lead to feeling. So how's it going to lead to serving? You want to serve. You absolutely want to serve. You absolutely want to be the Beinoni. That is your ideal. But you have no clue how to get there because the bridge got cut because you can't feel. So the Alter Rebbe in this chapter is not trying to convince the person to want a relationship with God. Not at all. He's trying to give him a way to bridge thought to service when the normative bridge, feeling, he has a hard time accessing. And again, later in Tanya, we come back to him and we demand from him to feel. He can, it's just difficult. But right now we're being easier on him. We're saying, yeah, you don't have, your bridge got burnt. You have a very hard time feeling. So how do I get you from thinking to action, thinking to service? So that's what the Alter Rebbe is doing. So he is not here trying to convince him the best thing is God and therefore serve God. He's assuming that's what the person wants. He's giving him a way to utilize his mind and through his mind, get him to be a Beinoni. Well, you need to feel to be a Beinoni. True. But you do feel. Because we all naturally love God. But I don't feel my love. It's a little hard for you to feel it, but it's really there. So the thoughts you think will like ignite that love that you're not really going to feel, but you will still access its power, and that will push you over to being the Beinoni. So when the Rebbe says to him, think about the only thing is God. There's nothing but God. There's nothing better to be with than God. Everything wants to be with God. He's not trying to convince him that God is good or God is real or he should have related with God. He's trying to focus his thinking in a systematic way to produce something, and the product is called Tavuna. But this thought, I mean, I think personally, these thoughts that the Rebbe is telling him, obviously, when we learn the chapter, even if we are not from that 9% place and we have plenty of feelings, it's still very powerful for us to apply these thoughts to ourselves. And this is the first of the 5. Understanding the only thing of value is God. And I was saying that I do think a lot of us intuitively, definitely, we might or not be able to articulate it, but definitely we feel it, because to me, anyone that more or less left everything else for God, which is every Baal Tshuva today, which is most of the people in this class, in essence, that's what you were feeling. Life is worthless, or life is transient, or life isn't satisfying, or life isn't real, however you expressed it. And what is God? So the only thing of value is God. And therefore, I'm going to sacrifice everything else because I want him. And I get him through serving him through Torah mitzvahs. So I would assume that the high majority of this group, intuitively or through a lot of thinking, came to this also. And this is the first step in creating Tavuna. Any other questions or thoughts on this?
I have a question.
Sure, Malky.
So what was just being said, do you think that it's possible the person who was going to the Alter Rebbe, possibly they might have had like a radical mindset in a way?
What do you mean
Like
by radical?
Radical as in like just they were kind of confused, but they were kind of feeling this very uneasy feeling, just that kind of felt like brutal in a way.
I don't think so. In this chapter, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think the Alter Rebbe is just addressing the people in the Jewish people, his followers or anyone else in the Jewish people, because Tanya is for the world, as the Alter Rebbe writes, of his generation, of all generations until Mashiach. So anyone who has difficulty feeling but wants a relationship with God. Because again, if you put yourself in the mindset of Chabad Hasidus, in the mindset of the Alter Rebbe, without emotions, it's really hard to have a relationship. That's the whole premise of Tanya. All we need, Tanya is based on one verse. Towards the end of Devarim, it's very close to you to serve God completely. And the Alter Rebbe is questioning that and saying, really? That doesn't seem so easy to us. And his basic answer is, but it is easy. Because if you only love and fear God, everything else is automatic. So once we conclude that, the question is, so how do I love and fear God? Oh, for that, read my work. So the whole perspective of these 53 chapters is to help a Jew love and fear God. And now we're saying that this person has a really hard time feeling in general. So how in the world is he supposed to do it? So Alter Rebbe is saying, you're right, you have such a hard time feeling. I'm going to create for you a different road. And that's the idea of Tefuna. So we're not saying someone who's coming with radical thoughts, with questioning thoughts, with doubting thoughts. No, we're just saying someone who's coming delinquent in his emotions. And that's who the Alter Rebbe is addressing. So from a set, would such a person be helped by davening, by Shema, which we of course discussed already in this class, how Shema, you use your intellect to lead to your emotions, lead to your actions. He would be helped 100%. Of course, davening would be very good for him because davening is an emotional experience. But it would take a lot of work on his part to get from his intellect to emotions. And as I said, later in Tanya, we demand him to do it. But at this point, we're just sort of trying to create another road. Any other questions or thoughts on this? Okay.
Well,
So
I
let's-
think that, I
Irma?
think that, yeah, I just think that general thought is so empowering, like, because it just seems like a really great survival thought, like, that you could get really freaked out by the world, but if you just have that thought that God is the only reality, you have power. Like, it's a very powerful thought.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And I always feel that that thought, which of course we develop later in Tanya for chapters, is the most reassuring thought I know. It's the most calming thought I know. It's I can go to it, I can't tell you how many times a day. So I totally agree with you. And I do think it's so foundational for our relationship, and for sure for our relationship through the prism of Hasidus, because in essence, yeah, it's the foundation of there's nothing but God. And I agree with you. There's nothing but God is the most reassuring line there is. It's all him. It's all in his very good hands. I do not run the world, thank God. I don't even run my life, thank God. It's all him. And if it's all him, it's all good. So yes, I agree with you. And I, obviously it's, the Rebbe is structuring this very deliberately. And this first thought, which again is not hard. Intellectual person doesn't mean he's brilliant. It just means his mode of operation is thinking. He's probably better at it than a lot of us because he does it a lot, and muscles grow when you use them. But it's just, you're such a, it's, the Rebbe is harnessing his talents. Whatever your talents are, that's how you're supposed to serve God. So if his talent is thinking, that's his mode of operation, great. So use your mind to connect. Use your mind to grasp very basic ideas. Not ideas that I have a hard time understanding, but think and think and think about them. Because the more you think about something, the more powerful it becomes. Like we all have lots of, I don't want to say you all, I can say myself, I have lots of negative garbage in my brain. That's very powerful because I've thought it many, many, many times. Anything you think has a grip on you. The more you think it, the more powerful the grip. And if you think it like once a day or once every 3 days for the last 50, 60, 70 years, it's got a super powerful grip. So as we think, we empower things. So the Rebbe is saying, great, you're an intellectual. You're not an emotional person. I'm giving you a super powerful idea to think about, and think about it, and think about it, and think about it. And the more you think about it, the more it will grip you, which is the idea. Let me just give you the second one, which is the natural flow from the first. All of these ideas naturally flow from each other. So the most important one was the first one. That's the foundation of which everything else is going to flow. So the second idea, v'gam, and also, nasha rucha shebekirbo. If I just understood and thought and empowered that there is nothing but God, the only thing of value is God, the only thing that is God, the only life is God, and therefore everything in all of creation should only desire God, simply as a means of existing, of being, of value, of life, of eternity, of anything. Well, then what's the natural corollary? Also me. First, I understand this is true theoretically, in a vacuum for creation. And now I apply it to myself as just the natural corollary. And also his soul inside of him. Kach yaseh lahem. Well, so too, it is most appropriate for them. Leo's close to love, to be absolutely subsumed in God. V'chasheka v'chafetza, with absolute desiring. Latzes min artikan hu aguf, to expire from that body, that vehicle, that container. L'dafka, to cling to God. So that is the second and natural corollary of the first. So I have to spend a lot of time making the first very powerful. The second should just flow. If the only thing of value of God, the only thing that exists is God, the only thing that is God. Everything in all creation only wants God. Me too. That's what the second thought is saying. And we will stop here, and we're going to do the next three next week. So thank you so much for joining. Does someone have something they would like to share that happened over this week?
I have something.
Okay, later.
You can go first if you like. Okay.
Malky, my camera's on your name. No face, of course. What would you like to share?
I would like to share something I decided to take upon myself, a hachlata, if that's okay.
What we're really doing here is things that happened, kindnesses of God, miracles, things we saw that we're thanking God for. But I could view a hachlata in that light. So now you're thanking God that you have the power to do this. So what would you like to thank him for? The power that you were able to commit to?
Well, it was something that I learned. One of your classes, actually, I gained. It was a Saturday night class with the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. I was on that class, and I decided to take upon myself. I know this might sound weird, but I'm going to explain a little why I decided to take it on. I decided from my vocabulary to eliminate the word guy. For a number of reasons. So the reason why I mainly decided on it was I was in a seminary that was not Lubavitch, and unfortunately there were a lot of individuals, the way they viewed unfortunately there's a lot of bad things talked about upon the non-Jews, and just all these things that were said not nicely, generalizing, stereotyping. And I'm not there to judge them, but what made me decide on this was it made me think really deeply within myself is, am I really doing what Hashem wants of me? Am I really doing my hishtadlus from the Rebbe? And it just made me really think deeply within myself that, if in order to really bring Mashiach closer, I feel like in order to do that we need to be we need to really be the light for them, show them, if we are the role models for all the other nations, and if we are really going to be the light to bring the redemption, then we need to be careful. I've learned we need to be careful not only with what we say, but with what we do. So it really just deeply
Beautiful.
made a
Very, very, very beautiful. And it's nice that the impression translated into something so practical. That's beautiful. Very beautiful. Thank
I
you for
gotta
sharing
say,
that.
I just want to comment that the biggest miracle is to make changes in ourselves, to tell you the truth.
Exactly. That's why I said a hachlata is a miracle. That's true. That's a famous story with Rebbe Rayatz when he was when he traveled to Eretz Yisrael in 1927. He met with Rav Kook, and Rav Kook was from Russia. So Rav Kook knew the Rebbe Rashab, and Rav Kook very much held of the Rebbe Rashab. So when the Rebbe Rayatz came to Eretz Yisrael, he met with Rav Kook, and Rav Kook right away started reminiscing all of the miracles of the Rebbe Rashab, all of the enormous powers of the Rebbe Rashab. And after he finished, Rav Kook said to the Rebbe Rayatz, like, what could he share, like a miracle of his father? And the Rebbe Rayatz said, the greatest miracle of my father are the Tmimim. And are his followers, are the students, are the Hasidim. Those are the miracles of my father's. So you're absolutely right. The greatest miracle is when a person changes. Absolutely. Russell, what did you want to add? What were you going to share with us?
Well, I had a great miracle this week. Actually, yes, for me, it's a great miracle. You know, I was so involved with, Facebook and Rumble and all these things about the vaccines, and
you told us
so
that last week.
Involved in politics and in Israel. Oh, last night, I was listening to some rabbi. It was something Musarnik, but it doesn't matter what. I don't even remember. In 1 second, I decided enough is enough. I took off the app from my phone. Then I see something jumping. I said, oh, no. I still have the messenger. I went and I removed that. I went through my phone, removed all the social media, everything.
Wow.
And I tell you, I woke up this morning, the davening was different. I mean, the time I wasted going through the pictures and trying to take off all these things that I was putting on my phone so I can post them. And, it just like, to me, I did so much today other than davening and reading Tehillim for other people and learning and cooking and doing I'm telling you, so much time was wasted and I feel so free. And I know this time it's going to last, Bezrat Hashem. So to me, that was a great miracle.
That sounds like a great liberation.
Yes.
A liberation from social media. Wow.
Yeah.
Liberation from wasting all that time. Wow.
Yes.
So you and Malki went in the same direction. It must have been some energy in the air this week. You both spoke about those personal liberating miracles. Very, very powerful, very applicable for all of us. Each person, it doesn't mean we have to be as obsessed as Rachel initially, but each one of us can also, I'm sure, in her own way, say, what emptiness am I wasting my time in? And if I just deleted it, if I just closed it, if I just said, guess what? I'm going to let God run his world and I'm going to serve him.
Exactly. And you just really, you let go. It's like I was going around today, not worrying about anything. I don't know what's happening in the world. You know what? The world will survive it. And I'll bring Kedusha and that's it.
And that's how you're helping the world. As you learn and as you study and as you say the Tehillim and as you give the charity, you are doing enormous things to help the world. That's how you help the world. Baruch Hashem. That's beautiful. Beautiful victory. Beautiful miracle. Thank you for sharing that. Yohannes, did you want to share something? I see your mic is off.
Yeah. I just had it was just a really cute thing that happened this morning, but it just felt like, I just feel like all the veils come off and we know Hashem is with us. We know the veils are thinning. We know Mashiach's here. And like, it was just one of those things where it just, I thought of my father this morning and I was just talking to my father. I said, Daddy, can you watch over my kids? I was like, I want you to take care of them. Like I was really like thinking of this image of each of my kids and my father. And I just had this, I was just very much in that deep place of like connecting to my father. And then a couple of minutes later, I had to drive my daughter to her job. And we go in the car and she dropped her phone in the snow. And she said, do you have any Kleenex? And I'm looking all over the car because I know I have a box of Kleenex. Of course, when we need it, it's not there. And so I look in my purse and I found a pocket pack of Kleenex. And I know it sounds very silly, the pocket pack of Kleenex, but a pocket pack of Kleenex is my father. Like one time I bought pocket packs of Kleenex at the dollar store, and my father was still here, that everybody could see him. And Rachel came home from school and she said, Zadie's here, because he always brought us pocket packs. He always had it. Like, you need a Kleenex? My father always like, here, take this. And it was just such a funny thing that it just popped up, and I was like, oh my gosh, Zadie just gave you Kleenex. It was so, and I looked at her to explain to her, and she said, I know that's Zadie. You know, it was just such a clear. I mean, I posted on our family chat too, like the kids all were like, that's for sure Zadie. It was just such a, it sounds silly, but it was like a very
beautiful. Sounds very beautiful.
And I was
very
thinking
beautiful to
about
get that response.
But I felt it was like the Eibishter, like my father, so with us. But then I thought all of the Tzaddikim are with us. I really was thinking of like Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rachel. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Rivka, like, and all they're really all with us like that. Like, it's all, we all have it. It's all for our connecting. And it was such a deep feeling of like the knowing that we are all completely connected for real. Like, they really are our fathers and our mothers. And they're really connected to us like that. Like, it's such it just seems so revealed, like the truth of it. And we can all tap into that. And it was such a good feeling.
That you got that response. Of course, we turn and we think, but it's so nice that Hashem, you know.
Yeah, I felt really grateful.
Situation to happen, that your father was able to show himself to you so clearly. Very
but I felt like, but the feeling I came away with was that we can all tap into that because of where we are in the right now. It was like so clear, like almost like we're so silly that we don't realize it.
You're right. We're that close to Mashiach. Because we're that close to Mashiach, the veils are very thin. Absolutely. But I'm glad you merited to see it. It's a nice pick you upper. Thank you. Does someone else have something they'd like to share?
Yes.
Doesn't have to be as dramatic as that, Menucha?
Yeah, I would like to share the miracle that happened at work last week. I witnessed, to me, it's like really, really miracle. So I had a client at Brookdale Lakeshore Drive. She was Jewish, raised completely secular, and had secular life. But it was very important for her when I shared some updates about Jewish holidays and bringing her some packages from Chabad Care. So I know it was important. On the day before she died, I found she was in pain. And I wanted to distract her and to keep her on the side because she had pressure sores on her back. And she refused, she didn't want to stay on the side. So, and I found the letter, like brochure from Chicago Mitzvah campaign. Never ever we had any letters at that building that I saw. So I found on the table, and just I asked the caregiver to read. There was like an advertisement for free transportation, and the other side was Parsha, Torah Parsha. And I asked the caregiver to read this Torah Parsha to my client, and then next morning I found out that she died. And I think it was very special that like the day before she was listening to Torah words.
Right. Wow.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story. Beautiful.
I think so, yeah.
It's a Menucha miracle.
No.
Yes.
That's a miracle, yeah.
It's God works through us. We are the catalyst for creating the miracles. Like Rachel was sharing hers and Malki hers. And also Yehudis. I mean, you know, she was partner with the miracle. She turned to her father. She was begging him. She was focusing on him. And that allowed the response. So this was a Menucha miracle because you were the one that said, I want to keep her mind away from shifting from her side. So you didn't say, let's turn on the TV. You didn't say, you said, read her Torah. I know that's what she wants. And that's so, I totally understand what you're saying, because so many times, you know, my husband goes, to tell him, he goes to the like retirement homes, has partial retirement, partial nursing home. I mean, pre-corona, he would go all the time, like every week. And there was a number of people there. He goes to the same ones every week. So people he came very close to, people that were completely secular all their life. There was one man there that fought him so hard before he agreed to put on film the first time. It was months and months and months of throwing my husband out of his apartment until he finally agreed to put on film with him. And as you know, these people pass away, each one, to me, I always feel like, wow, that this person, that this soul merited that through my husband's persistence, he put on fill-in so many times before he passed away, and how that's a completely different eternity for this soul. So you're lucky. Let's look like that. You're lucky that God used you as his tool to help this woman, to help her soul forever. Very powerful. Thank you for that. Anyone else would like to share? It seems like it was a really strong week. Anyone else have something they would like to share?
I have a little story. It's Dottie. I have a little
Hi,
story.
Dottie.
Hi. Thanks for a wonderful class.
Thank you.
So I lost a friend June of last year, a very dear friend, and I was thinking about her very hard and missing her, and so I was going down the back stairs, and there was this a little. I heard it sounded like a bird, a little cooing, and I saw there was a dove on the ground. And I thought, this it's so cold out. What is this dove doing here? And I startled it when I went down the stairs to go in the basement. So when I came up, it was still there. And I startled it again, like, little dove, what are you doing here? You know, and then it flew up onto the wires of the telephone wires. And I thought, gee, what is this little dove doing in the winter here? So then a couple of days later, a friend called who knew my friend that passed away. And I said, the funniest thing happened. She said, I saw this, I went downstairs and there was a little dove waiting at the bottom of the stairs, and I startled it, then flew away. She said, Daddy, you're not going to believe this. But her name was Kathleen, who found out she was Jewish right before she died, coincidentally. She used to have a pet dove named Snow. I said, what? She said, she had a pet dove named Snow. I said, well, I think she came to visit me. She says, yeah, I think she came to visit you. So I think my friend came to visit me.
That's beautiful. Wow. Wow.
And she
thinking about her, she responded.
Yeah. And she loved Judaism, and she found out right before she passed, she went to a rabbi. Rabbi said, you're actually Jewish. She was always Jewish and she didn't know it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's yeah. And people that are sensitive, like your host is saying with her father, people that are sensitive, see a lot going on, a lot of layers of a lot of things going on. It's very special. Very special. It must have been a special week. Just seeing so many people that had something, you know, various ways, they really were able to see something really special this week. Thank you. Anyone else has something they'd like to thank God for? Or like to share?
That I finally got on the shear tonight.
Absolutely. And I sure hope you know why there was obstructions. You know, it's, as I was just saying to someone like yesterday, whenever there's all these barriers, you either know what you're doing is really right or really not your road. So hopefully you figured out why it was so difficult to get on, because something tonight you were supposed to hear.
My phone, I still can't figure out how to get on, but I pressed one button 4 different times to get onto the Zoom, and then it had like some dialogue underneath. I said, I'm going for broke, and I pressed the bottom button, the bottom thing, what it said, and then it told me to put my name on. So the computer is somehow registered in my credit card name, Sharon Miller. So I put that name in instead of Sarah Miller. So then all of a sudden it worked.
Well, you are the foundation member here. I think you're the longest coming member of this class, so definitely.
Wait, I think Yehuda Spruberger
I
maybe.
think Bracha is.
Oh,
Bracha.
Bracha.
How are
I
you,
think
Bracha?
Bracha.
All right, Bracha, you
Bracha.
win.
I think
Sharon, you're
Bracha wins, but we'll give Yehudis
Sharon.
and Sarah
Yeah, okay.
definitely
They're back
honorable
there too.
mention.
I'd be honored with that honor, but I don't know if I deserve it.
Well, we'll take it. When
Yehuda, I
someone gives
just
you
wanna-
honor, just take it.
From all the years that I'm coming to the class in person and now, computer wise, whether you really understand it deeply, it penetrates your neshama. The learning Tanya, not just like reading it for chitas, but when you go more in depth like we do, it's really a life changer. A game changer isn't the right thing. It's a life changer.
That's the miracle. That's the miracle that the Rebbe Yatz was saying, that his father, the miracle of his father are the Hasidim. That's the miracle that Hasidus does. It makes us the miracles.
It really makes it so that it's almost like, people say, how do you know? It's like, it's the game changer between how do you know and like, how do you not know? It's like God becomes so clear and we become we're just like a Pella that we could be created. It's that change between God for sure. We are like, who knows
Here's a
what?
question mark.
Yeah. It's like the whole thing switches, like
Exactly.
to like.
I say welcome, Lisa. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for coming. Let me just end now with giving over, and thank you, Fruma, for bringing her. That's always nice.
Thank you. Thank you, Fruma, for inviting me, and thank you for an excellent class.
Oh, my pleasure. Next time you can ask questions, because obviously maybe not everything is so clear. You can always just send it up as like a personal chat.
Lisa's been my Tanya partner for a lot of years.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Oh, this is as many
all,
years as Hinda?
For my Hinda, right?
Yeah,
She's my
beautiful. That's beautiful. All right, so Lisa, you're qualified. It's all under your belt.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but I did learn an awful lot tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So just to conclude with a thought of Mashiach, of what the Rebbe shared with us this week, this Shabbos, Parshas Mishpatim in 1992. I mean, usually you try to pull out the Mashiach part of the talk. Here it's sort of hard because the entire talk is the Mashiach part of the talk. But in great brevity, the Rebbe was looking at something which is interesting, because sometimes the Rebbe shines a light on something and you wonder, does the world understand how important it is as much as the Rebbe? But actually this thing in perhaps a different way, yes. Because I remember I once took my children to the Children's Museum downtown, and they're making like a timeline of the years, and on their timeline for 1992, they did write this as a very, very critical event of maybe like the 5 or 6 events they picked per year. This was a peace treaty in the UN, very unusual event because it wasn't signed or accepted by the ambassadors of the countries. It was actually the presidents, the heads of state, the leaders of all the powerful countries that formed that like inner circle of the UN. They all came together to Manhattan and agreed on a world peace, an initiative for peace, an initiative for disarmament. And the Rebbe looks at this and says again and again and again and again that this is the beginning of fulfillment, the classical messianic fulfillment, which is actually inscribed on the wall outside the UN, and they will beat their swords into plowshares. So the UN statement of purpose is, and they will beat their swords into plowshares. And the Rebbe is saying this prophecy is being fulfilled by this peace treaty, which is A, saying disarmament, and B, is saying to use the money that will be saved by the disarmament to feed the world. They will beat their swords into plowshares, from plowshares to food, from disarmament to feeding a world. And it's a very intently powerful, intently exciting talk of the Rebbe, where he says we are at the high time for the coming of Mashiach, because it's now. Look, if the prophecy of Yeshaya is already being fulfilled in 1992. Yeshaya said this thousands of years before. In 1992, it's fulfilled in Manhattan. And why is it fulfilled in Manhattan? Because that's the city of the leader of the generation. Because that's the place of the Rebbe. So since this is, and it's very interesting, why in the world is the UN in Manhattan and not in a different place or in a capital? Why is it in New York? Because this is the city of the Rebbe. And it happens to be that the building of the UN was built in the year of the Rebbe's Nasius in 1950. So very connected to Rebbe, very connected to Mashiach. And because the Rebbe says of the impact of the Rebbe, not referring to himself, on bringing the entire world to Mashiach, therefore, this is reflected in the UN's decision that the nations of the world, the kings of the world, because the hearts of the kings are in God's hands, and a king does not what he wants, but what God wants, which is very reassuring, of course, to us. So this is what the kings are deciding, because this is what now where the world's holding. It's very interesting because Malki before spoke about her personal resolution to think of a non-Jew in a more honorable way. In this talk, very interesting, the Rebbe says that the mission, the mandate, and all of his emissaries, of course, is to reach all 15 million Jews of the world. And also, and the Rebbe says, and perhaps primarily, to reach all the non-Jews of the world, all 8 billion of them, to bring them to serve God as well. Because, of course, this is the road to Mashiach. Mashiach is not only Mashiach for the Jews, Mashiach is Mashiach for the world. And therefore, the Rebbe, in ushering in Mashiach for the world, is saying, Shluchim, emissaries of mine, you've got 8 billion people you have to reach. Because when the non-Jews are recognizing God, this is really the world turning and accepting God. This is a process of Mashiach. That's a very, very brief expression of what the Rebbe said in this very powerful talk. But it definitely, when you learn it, you feel the intensity, the nowness, the passion, the urgency of this is it. This is the time we have arrived. And that was in 1992. So if we arrived in 1992, boy, have we arrived now. We should see it. We should see it with our physical eyes. We shouldn't have to learn about it. We shouldn't have to read about it. We shouldn't have to believe it. We should see it completely revealed for the eyes of the entire world. Thank you so much for joining. Every single person here asked so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. And hopefully, as Yehuda said,
Thank you.
each one of us, we are going to become the miracles of the Rebbe through the miracles
Amen.
of Tanya.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
Amen.
Bye,
Amen.
everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.